Cory Klippsten is the co-founder of Swan Bitcoin, as well as a Bitcoin angel investor and a Bitcoin educator. We had a wide-ranging conversation that started off with Cory's work at Swan Bitcoin and got into the Lightning work that Cory is doing. We got into startup investing. We got into the macroeconomic picture, educating Bitcoiners, and much more. As always, this is a Lightning podcast, so the best way that you guys can show your appreciation and support for the show is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network. You can also send in comments and questions with those sats, and I read off all of them at the end of the show in the Lightning round. Now, quick shout out before we get into the episode. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage, the industry standard and next generation provider for Lightning Network infrastructure. We will have more from Voltage later in the show in the Lightning round. Hope you enjoy the episode. Cory, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk about all sorts of Bitcoin related topics with you. You've been a very influential figure in the Bitcoin space, a Bitcoin advocate for many years. But maybe we'll step back a bit and start with your history and first getting into Bitcoin and why you decided to start Swan Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. So used to work for really big companies like Microsoft, Morgan Stanley, McKinsey, Google. I started getting into startups when I was at Google. So I started advising startups, cutting angel checks, and kind of getting involved with Google's Entrepreneurship Week stuff and just trying to get my feet wet in kind of the Silicon Valley ecosystem. I moved from Chicago to Los Angeles to be closer to the startup world. Wifey was not down with the weather in San Francisco, so LA was good enough. Ended up being the right choice, as I found out half the VCs actually live down here and just keep their 650 and 415 numbers. So it's kind of the best of both worlds if you're down in SoCal. So I've been doing that kind of, startup-y investing, advising, operating thing for a decade now. And that was cleaved into by getting into Bitcoin in the last bull run. So all the noise about the price run up in 2017 caught my attention. Like a lot of people, especially if you're coming from kind of startup techie land, I got confused by all the VCs talking about ICOs and tokens. And I have like a super embarrassing 40 or 50 page fund thesis about friction tokens that I was going to launch, with late stage Silicon Valley marketplaces. And, I just didn't understand what I was getting into. That bubble in my brain started to burst toward the end of 2017, just meeting some Bitcoiners that were starting to explain to me kind of what was really going on with the crypto stuff. And by March, April of 2018, I realized I wanted to focus on only Bitcoin and didn't want to read any crypto white papers or do anything in that space anymore. Stopped trading and trying to punt shit coins on Binance and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just been trying to work in Bitcoin ever since. I guess that's, wow, is it 2022? I guess it's about 4 years trying to do something exclusively in Bitcoin. Had the idea for what's become Swan in spring of 2019, started the company in June of 2019, launched Swan Bitcoin right at the end of March. So it was actually exactly 2 years ago in 2020. So yeah, that was really it. I think the insight was that the marketing for a Bitcoin company, at least one that I ran, would have to be purely education focused. And that was something that I was passionate about, and it would let us really leverage some of my experience in media. I've done a lot of work in media over the years, and actually was a really crappy NBC TV reporter in the late 90s before going to work for Microsoft. So have some experience and stayed close to kind of how the media world works, and did some YouTube strategy work at Google and worked with a bunch of video startups post Google. So I've always kind of watched that and been appreciative of media as marketing, and not actually having ad budgets and just spending that on staff salaries for people to create content that you own and can kind of control the distribution of that and syndicate that content out to other people. And so that's basically what we've built. I think for a long time it was probably over half the staff at Swan. Now the engineers and the business people have caught up, and probably the content creation education team is probably about a third of the staff, but it's still significant. It's probably almost 20 people that are still working on content basically every day.
Very cool. What is it that motivates you specifically to work on Bitcoin every day? Because you've been doing this now for a few years. You've been, pushing forward this idea that people need to understand what Bitcoin is, helping educate people. What is it that gets you up every morning? Why do you continue to focus exclusively on Bitcoin today?
I mean, I don't know what else you could possibly want to work on. It's the most exciting thing that's happened in many generations, really. I mean, I'd have to go back toward probably like the harnessing of energy at an industrial scale in the 1800s to find something kind of this big, as far as what it can do. I guess, the computing revolution is similar, but this just cuts across so many different areas. It's not just technology, it's also money, it's also politics, it's economics, it's history, it's literally everything. So whatever you're interested in, that field affects Bitcoin and is affected by Bitcoin. And so kind of from an intellectual curiosity standpoint, it's endlessly fascinating. And everything is sort of about Bitcoin in one way or another. And Bitcoin is kind of about everything.
Right. And so with Swan, your focus here is on helping people save Bitcoin, help dollar cost average into Bitcoin.
That's the first product.
Okay.
That was the first product that we launched with in 2020, obviously, and it's great to rather be known for something than nothing. But it's probably about 20% of our sales is automatic recurring purchase plans. We also have clients that have bought $100 million worth of Bitcoin through us. So we have a whole Swan Private Client Service division with some of the most renowned experts in the world, like Stefan Livera, actually having one-on-one conversations with high net worth individuals, family offices, and corporations around the world. We serve more than 100 countries. We've actually had purchases from over 70 countries, which is pretty fascinating. And that business is actually larger outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. And I think also the advisor services business that we're launching in April, which Andy Edstrom runs, the author of Why Buy Bitcoin, that has the potential to be larger than everything else that we do, which is pretty cool. So I think, Swan Private Client Services is just slightly larger than our retail business. And I think advisor services could end up being bigger than both of them. And then I think, 4 years from now, as Bitcoin makes a transition into being a more widely used medium of exchange, some of the things that we're building on Lightning and around payments and around value for value and things like that, it's very possible that all ends up dwarfing everything we ever did selling Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking, is like so much of what you're doing today is focused around the idea of buying it and saving in it. And that's like obviously a huge use case for Bitcoin today. I'm thinking about like, where does this lead for you guys? Are you I know you're doing a bit with the Bitcoin benefits plan, and you're helping people then earn Bitcoin as part of a salary. And you mentioned medium of exchange and Lightning. Like, if you can break these down to different buckets, how important do you think these different segments are going to be over time? Do you think that helping people earn salaries in Bitcoin, do you think that will become a meaningful contributor to Swan's business? Would love to know if there's any other segments that you think are yet to be tapped into but will be meaningful in the future.
Yeah, I mean, generally I think you just want to kind of chart your company's path to take advantage of the stage of monetization of the asset that we're in. So we're still early in Bitcoin as a store of value, and we're extremely early in sort of global adoption of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. And so it makes a lot of sense to have most of your company focused on the next, 20 years of fiat moving into Bitcoin and other assets being sold and converted into BTC, and also place some bets and be kind of an early player and an early creative force, kind of getting your seat at the table as medium of exchange starts to take off. Mm-hmm. But it's a minuscule number of people globally buying Bitcoin, and an even smaller number that are actually spending it.
Right, that makes sense. Now, one of the programs you guys recently launched, or one of the partnerships, is with Compton Magic. Can you speak to it a bit about how that partnership works today, and whether or not we can expect to see more similar partnerships happening in the world of sports, or in the world of entertainment, or in any other kind of sphere of the economy moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Bitcoin benefit plan is really simple. It just basically lets a company give some Bitcoin to each of their employees every month as a fringe benefit. So instead of a spa day or a gym membership or whatever else you might give them, transportation bonus, you can add this into the mix of your benefits for employee retention, morale, have a conversation about sound money and sort of the value of working hard. And, a Bitcoiner is generally a better worker than a non-Bitcoiner because you're sort of low time preference and you start to develop an affinity for truth and honor and long-term thinking. And, so it probably makes a lot of sense to try to orange pill your work staff. Anyway, so it's working great. March is the first month, got a couple dozen companies on it. I think we'll have hundreds and then thousands of companies doing this over time. You mentioned the Compton Magic. So they're an AAU basketball team, one of the best known. They've had 2 top 10 lottery picks, I think a number 3 and a number 6, or number 2 and a number 6 draft pick in the last couple drafts. Basically, we've been friends with them for a while through a director who made a movie first about the Magic and then about their coach and CEO. Taupe is his name. And I participated in some of the marketing around the launch of the second movie that's called Lynchpin. And we just became friendly, and he's getting pretty orange pilled after talking to me and doing some research. And the director's a big Bitcoin fan and a big Swan fan, so he's kind of been in the guy's ear. And then there's been this change of allowing amateur athletes to be compensated. The name image likeness rights over the past couple of years, and that's rolling out. And so they can actually do things like this now. And so, we've created an educational program to teach all the players and employees of the Compton Magic about Bitcoin while the company actually buys a little bit of Bitcoin for them each month.
Love it. What are the steps required to get to the point where we see like an NBA team have everyone's salary based in Bitcoin, or the option to have a salary in Bitcoin?
I mean, I think they have the option today. That's never been something that had to come from the team. Like what you get paid in doesn't matter. What you store it in is what really matters, right? So any of these athletes that have said, I'm getting paid in Bitcoin, like the team has never once actually paid Russell or Saquon or any of these guys in Bitcoin. They just open up a bank account at Prime Trust. They get some of their salary wired or ACH, whatever, into that bank account, and then it's converted into Bitcoin at their Prime Trust account. Prime Trust is the back end for both Strike and for Swan. So that's just basically what it works. So we have tens of thousands of people getting paid in Bitcoin the exact same way. Their dollars go into their account at Prime Trust and gets converted into Bitcoin. And it can be their whole salary or some of their salary. That's literally what automatic recurring purchases are.
Now,
so we've been using the get paid in Bitcoin hashtag for 2 years.
Yeah. Do you think that eventually we get to a point where the employers are just directly allowing people to earn in Bitcoin and not having to go through fiat?
They'd have to be storing their value in Bitcoin. They'd have to have a Bitcoin denominated balance sheet. So when is that going to happen? That's going to happen when Bitcoin market cap is like, $100 to $200 trillion. Right. Until then, in the US anyway, it'll be dollar denominated for a few more decades, I would say.
Interesting. So do you think there's any companies now that have that, like MicroStrategy has a Bitcoin denominated balance sheet? Are they at a stage where they could then say to employees, hey, anyone who wants to get paid in Bitcoin, we can do that?
They don't have a Bitcoin denominated balance sheet. That is not their unit of account. Their unit of account is dollars, and they pay their employees in dollars. They have a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but it's an asset that they hold in reserve. It's not, their accounting and everything that they turn into the IRS is obviously US dollar denominated.
Yeah. And so I guess you got to wait until the accounting catches up and until you get to the point where everyone can denominate everything in Bitcoin before employees can earn Bitcoin?
No, we pay employees in Bitcoin. I'd say, maybe a quarter of our staff takes their pay in Bitcoin, something like that. A lot of our people outside the US prefer to just get paid in Bitcoin.
Right. It's just easier than traditional.
It's just easier than, dealing with bank accounts and all that crap. So they're just a contractor to us, and, they're a 1099 employee as far as our taxes in the US, and we just send them Bitcoin and we record the dollar value of the Bitcoin at the time we sent it.
Interesting. Okay, so what do you think then, if we're looking out the next few decades and we're thinking about Bitcoin adoption and what those like milestones are to get to the point where everyone is using Bitcoin as a unit of account? What do you think the biggest constraints are today limiting Bitcoin adoption?
Low price.
Okay, you think, and
It's
now,
market cap based. It just needs more value in it. Like it makes, here's the deal. So the number of people that want to spend Bitcoin today is basically the cohort of people who had conviction 8 to 10 years ago and put a lot of money in like 2011 through 2014 or 15. And they have enough of their net worth, like 95 to 99% of their net worth in Bitcoin, to the point that they're actually interested. There's actually consumer demand among that cohort to be able to spend Bitcoin around the world. And so that's who you see outside of, people who work in the industry and are kind of, lightning hobbyists, just like people tinkering with motherboards in the 70s. Outside of those people and the very few people in that early cohort that are now Bitcoin rich, nobody else needs to spend Bitcoin in the Western world, developed world, where you have credit cards and things like that. Obviously, we're seeing a blooming of use cases for Bitcoin as medium of exchange in places where people are unbanked, and it actually, you're seeing some nibbles there, and I think that's really exciting. And obviously, I invest in a bunch of startups that do kind of the developed world stuff. But in the West and kind of where Swan's business is focused, it's just not a big market yet. What I'm really interested in, and why I'm trying to chart a path for Swan, and why we're adding a Lightning wallet into, not just our own app, but also doing a, straight from bank account to balance on Lightning for like the Fountain app, a couple of the other V4V podcast apps, and a bunch of other, Bitcoin and non-Bitcoin sites and apps and services with APIs and SDKs, is we think that next cohort, call it like the 2016 to 2018 cohort, a lot of those people end up wanting to spend Bitcoin by like 2025, 2026. And I think you want to have a very established brand, a really creative team with a lot of capabilities and a lot of creativity to take lots of swings at different medium of exchange use cases, product services, to serve that much larger cohort that's coming through in a few years. So that's why we're placing some bets there. We call it, Swan Labs or Bitcoiner Labs or something like that, and start playing with a lot of that stuff.
Now, what are your thoughts on, like, I get the idea of spending Bitcoin. What about the ability for Swan to create products around earning Bitcoin, like natively, like through, you see some of the value for value stuff taking off right now. Yeah. People are able to earn small amounts of sats for doing various tasks or for sharing content. Is there any opportunity there for Swan, do you think, to help people earn Bitcoin without ever having to buy any, or without ever having to, even have a full-time job, and just being able to like earn natively through the internet?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're working very closely with the Value for Value podcast apps, with Adam Curry in the Podcast Index and Dave Jones and all those guys, and enabling people to charge their wallets up really easily. And we're actually seeding people with their first $5 or $10 of Lightning sats when they download these apps. That's the plan, so that people can kind of download the app, have never used Bitcoin before, and they've got a balance that they can start spending and boosting, and then make it super easy to top that up and charge it up again, and keep listening and supporting the content creators that you love. Obviously, Zebedee is doing a lot of awesome stuff in this space, and our whole team is very close with them. I think there's a lot of room to run for those guys across gaming. And, I think, so there are already a few use cases where, Bitcoin is the best medium of exchange possible for selected use cases. And that's how it starts. Once there's one, that's a 0 to 1 moment. And now we will see an explosion of creativity over the next few years, where the number of use cases multiplies, and we'll just see that dramatically. I mean, I already think of like, I already have startup ideas that I, maybe have been working on. I think of one I was working on like 3 years ago and one I was working on about 5 years ago. And both of them remain great ideas, and both of them are actually better with Bitcoin. Like one of them is a dramatically larger idea because of Bitcoin and being able to use Bitcoin as the payment rails and the medium of exchange in the marketplace, essentially. And so, we're launching, we've got Bitcoiner Jobs that obviously is a big marketplace for people to find work, and, Cash App is on there, and River and Strike and Unchained, like we're hands off. Like Swan's Jobs are on there too, but like that's just a community resource. But you think about services. So people actually posting, gigs that they want to perform, but not go work for somebody, but actually want to sell, accounting services or personal training or something like that. Like that's an interesting marketplace that could be made better and made global through the integration of payments with Bitcoin, and think about like escrow and kind of all the different ways, and mediation and ratings. Like you could actually make a really robust services marketplace that I think would be better with Bitcoin, significantly better with Bitcoin than with fiat.
Right. Kind of replacing like a Fiverr or an Upwork and being able to do basically any task, and even tasks that can't be supported by that, right? You could do
Absolutely.
I think there's a site, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a site where you can like earn sats for following people on Twitter. And it's like
right?
you earn like 5 sats or something. But
Yeah.
it works, and you can do that on Bitcoin, but you can't do it on fiat. Okay, I wanna get your thoughts on one more question in regards to Bitcoin's price, because you mentioned that was the biggest constraint for more adoption. Does that change if we denominate Bitcoin in sats? I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I don't think so.
Do you think unit bias is a real thing right now? Is this why you see shitcoins jump up to enormous valuations, because they have 10 trillion of them?
Those things don't last though, right? People don't buy and hold those things for long periods of time. Like every one of those charts, I don't know which way I'm mirrored, but it's like boom, and then it's just like this slow bleed forever and never goes up again. So I don't think it really matters if you have trillions of coins that are worth like a fraction of a penny. These things don't have lasting value. That's not smart money going after that. It's just dumb people and traders. So it doesn't really matter. I don't think you need dumb people buying Bitcoin. It really doesn't matter. Like you're not going to have much money. Almost by definition, if you're a mark for Shiba Inu, almost by definition, you don't have very much money and very much intelligence. So I just don't think it matters. Yeah. I mean, I think that like it's a monetary network, right? So what you need is lots of value to be stored in Bitcoin. And so, 1,000 people putting $100 each, it's $100,000, is not worth nearly as much as one person putting $1 million in to Bitcoin as store of value.
Right. Yes, as a store of value. So I see the two types of markets developing. One where on Bitcoin, you're right. You need the money. You need the capital. You want the richest people in the world to put all their money in. You don't really care that everyone's putting in $10. But on the other side, on the Lightning side,
I care. I care that people. Yeah. No. And I know where you're getting to. Yeah. I mean, I think. So I wasn't saying that adoption depends on. It's actually the opposite. So the cause is adoption and the effect is price rises.
Yeah. And now is it adoption though of people or adoption of money? Because if you're talking about Lightning,
it's both. They're related. It's both. They're related, because if you bring 100 people in, a couple of them are millionaires, and a couple of them come into money. You don't know who that's going to be, so you need them all in. And we think about that at Swan, like people that use your company, get to know your services and your products and your people and like them, they recommend. That's what people are. We're recommendation beasts. When we like something and we use a service, we generally tell other people about it. And so, we consider every single customer of Swan like an extension of our evangelism team. And so I don't care. Like if you buy $10 a month, that's great. We're going to serve you like crazy and hope that you have a rich auntie. that you tell about Swan.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I got a question about, well, I'll just frame it this way. If you were to get up in front of every Bitcoiner in the world today, and you could share one message with them about Bitcoin, what is that message?
The more you know, the more you buy.
And if you were
You have to invest equally in learning about Bitcoin and Bitcoin, the asset.
I like that. Now, if you were to get up in front of a group of non-Bitcoiners, what would that message be?
Same message.
And it would just be start learning?
Get started learning.
Yeah.
Go to swan.com/free book, grab a free copy of my favorite intro to the subject, which is Jan Pritzker's book, Inventing Bitcoin. Grab an ebook or an audiobook. We've given away probably 200,000 copies of that in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. What's the hardest part about educating people about Bitcoin?
I think it's probably meeting people where they are and kind of figuring out ways to do that at scale. So it's trying to figure out, what somebody is going to respond to and giving them more content that is going to be received and, get opened, let's say, if it's email or get watched if it's on YouTube, and trying to create these different personae or profiles of people and talk to them in a way that that resonates with them. Because the way you talk about Bitcoin to like a yoga teacher versus a physicist versus, a Ukrainian refugee, it's different.
Right.
So I think that's some of the most interesting stuff is basically just trying to, and we kind of approach it through kind of a theory of Bitcoin and blank, and then just you have an affinity for this or you're from this group, and we try to create content around like, Bitcoin and doctors, or we've got this, Bitcoin and Harley tour coming up, and there's a whole thing around like, independence, America, freedom, don't tread on me, and that all kind of fits for that audience. And then there's, finance people, and there's a way to talk to them about portfolio construction and Sharpe ratios and, tail risks and all those kinds of things, and risk on and risk off. And, you can kind of talk to people in different ways, and doing that well and scaling that through technology, media, and smart staff. It's a heck of an undertaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got to be personalized, and you got to target so many different people who may have very different backgrounds. Are you noticing that with the recent rise in inflation, is this becoming a central point that a lot of people from different backgrounds can congregate around and understand? Is that like becoming a focal point for you guys? Are you recognizing that as a strong selling point for people who are not Bitcoiners? Or is that just is that still just like a thing that Bitcoiners focus on and most people haven't quite realized yet?
You'd think people would be even more worried than they are. It does kind of blow my mind but they're so used to believing what they read and see on TV, and the messaging is still like, it's not going to be this bad for long. This is just post-COVID inflation, the economy coming back. Wait for the next year's numbers to lap and we'll see what's going on. Like, yeah, I mean, I think the alarm bells are going off all around us. It's red flag time. And a lot of people still seem to have their head stuck in the sand. It's kind of interesting. But, the people that are awake to it, they're getting our education and watching our shows and seeing our people on other platforms. And obviously we're writing about it and talking about it all the time. So yeah, I think people that have their eyes open to inflation and what it means, I think, anybody that lived through the 70s, it seems like, a lot of the boomers and the older Gen X people kind of have their eyes open a little bit to what's going on, because it does kind of rhyme with that. But yeah, it is kind of surprising to me that it's not everywhere all the time. And I think maybe it's just bigger stories, COVID for a year and a half or 2 years, and then straight into Russia, Ukraine for the last month and a half. It seems like seems like there's a lot of distraction out there that doesn't make the rampant inflation and rents up 24% year over year across the US, and, you know, $6.79 gas at my station down the street. Like, that's not the headline story, and it should be. It would be in any normal time.
How much worse does it have to get for it to become the headline story?
I mean, I wish that it wouldn't get worse, but it's gonna. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a prepper, but preppers don't look crazy to me anymore.
Right. Yeah. And
I'm preparing in my own way anyway. I'm preparing with Bitcoin.
Is there any other way to, if you got your Bitcoin and you figure you have this kind of financial assurance that you're not going to get your money inflated away, is there any other protection or system you try and teach people about to prepare for what could be on the horizon? And that could span beyond just inflation. I don't know what the answer is there, but is Bitcoin enough, or are there other steps you should be taking to?
For me, I think like location and where you and your family live in what situation is probably the most important one, outside of, or maybe just alongside securing your financial situation. And that's different for everybody. You know, people are comfortable in different places, but you got to kind of like find your tribe and find what you're comfortable with, and, you know, try to give yourself a little bit of peace and space, you know, mentally and emotionally, by being comfortable with where you are.
Right.
You know, where you're going to raise your kids, who you're going to be around. I think that's something that's really important to get right. And I think we can be lazy about it because we live our lives online and it seems like you're just connected by computer, but like pay attention to what's outside, you know, downstairs when you go out of your building in a big city. Like, pay attention to what's there and look at the stores and the people around you where you live, you know, wherever it is. And, you know, take this opportunity, this disruption that we've had the last couple of years, to reevaluate a little bit, like where you want to be and who you want to be around. And, you know, I think maybe being around family is more important than it's ever been before. That's one thing that I think if I were in my 20s now, I would probably give extra weight to that. Whereas, you know, my family was always on the West Coast and I spent my 20s and 30s in New York and Chicago. I would probably have, you know, come back to California or Seattle or something like that, like way, way earlier, if I were looking at the world the way it looks today.
Interesting. Do you think that governments
I'm a
are
long-term
are
optimist, by the way. I'm like a dramatic, off the charts, like feet not tethered to the ground optimist long-term. It just, you know, this conflict with Russia just pulled a lot of things forward and compressed the timeline dramatically. Yeah. And I think we're heading into like really turbulent times for the next 3-4 years globally.
And I mean, COVID did the same thing, I think, right? Like we've had a lot of events here that we just don't have much precedent for, and there are a lot of unknowns for sure.
Yeah. We have a lot of precedent for both of them. I mean, the Spanish flu was worse than COVID in terms of death and economic effect. Well, but I mean, that's what reading is for, right? So there is precedent. It's not that long ago. It's 100 years ago, and there's plenty of precedent for like what happens when, you know, globalization goes the other direction and we kind of deglobalize. And when there's a conflict in Europe, what does that do to the world, right?
Yeah.
So,
but some of the other events, like working from home, is kind of a first big, you know, that was a first moment where we haven't really turned everyone off from office jobs in an instant, and we're kind of seeing what those impacts are going to be.
Well, I will say this just about the, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I think, will have dramatically more effect on the world than COVID did.
What do you think the effect will be?
Just massive acceleration of deglobalization. I think disintegration of a number of sort of norms and global institutions that we have been used to for our entire lives if you were born after World War II. a lot of hungry people in a lot of countries around the world, probably revolting against their governments, like Arab Spring times 10.
Is that just you think that's a second order effect of the fertilizers and like not being able to get natural gas and oil out of Russia? Is that kind of the
Yeah, it's
trend line
the
there?
agricultural products is the big thing there for sure. Yeah, and this whole thing is, it's bad for everybody. It's less bad for the U.S. and it's probably worst, other than for the combatants, Russia and Ukraine. It's probably worst for China.
How so? I'm curious to know what your thoughts are there.
Because they rely on imports for almost everything, and everybody's kind of shutting down and saying we're keeping our stuff for ourselves, and so it's going to get harder and harder for them to go and get things from other people. And most of the deficit in Russian production, you've got some people that think, oh, China's just going to pick it up, but they can't. The pipelines all flow west; they don't go east. The only oil and gas that China gets is the stuff from like the eastern end of Russia. And that's all serviced by Western firms that have pulled out. So even though the oil and gas are like flowing today still, the second you need some expertise or a part for any of those oil fields and gas pipelines and everything in the eastern part of Russia, like it's just not going to get repaired. And it's just basically going to come offline. So China's facing like a massive fossil fuel shortage over the next few years.
Interesting.
And an agricultural product shortage, and I mean everything. Like they basically, like China had to thread like 9 needles in a row to even exist in a deglobalized world, and that's what they were trying to do as fast as possible with One Belt, One Road and all these other things, and stadium diplomacy in Africa and all that kind of stuff. And like it's just they didn't make it. So that's going to be the biggest story, I think, geopolitically over the next 20, 30 years, is how everyone that forecast the rise of China and a supposed eclipse of the United States as like sort of the unipolar, global hegemon are going to be proven dramatically wrong as China shrinks
Really
and turns inward and basically, unfortunately, has hundreds of millions of starving people.
Well, that's a new perspective. I haven't heard that one before. I really appreciate that. I wonder what you think about other governments that are. I'm specifically thinking about smaller governments, like you look at El Salvador,
Yeah.
who's embracing Bitcoin, embracing change, embracing this kind of like moving forward towards looking towards the future, and they have a small enough footprint that they're nimble enough and they can probably kind of make it work. What do you think about their position in the global economy, and can other nations also step in and use Bitcoin as a tool to elevate their status among governments around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it could be Bitcoin. It could also just be, setting up an economic zone and, attracting capital with low taxes and, putting in some tech infrastructure, that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of different things you can do. Bitcoin is obviously working for El Salvador with their increased tourism budget and entrepreneurs moving there and opening businesses and capital flowing in. I mean, it's a country of 6 million people, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, half the size of LA County. Like, obviously, if you get a good mayor in Los Angeles and cut a few taxes, like the economy takes off here, right? Mm-hmm. And this is double the size of El Salvador. So if you get a business-friendly president who makes some smart decisions and cuts some deals with, the people they need to cut deals with and attracts entrepreneurship and investment, obviously it can change things dramatically. And there are a lot of places around the world, municipalities, cantons in Switzerland, little country states like Malta or little like city states like Malta and Liechtenstein and some of these smaller places, like they can do things that change, the GDP and the quality of life dramatically in a short amount of time, Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's super exciting. I love the experimentation. I hope we see it a lot more at sort of the state and city level throughout the US as well, experimenting with these different models. I think we're going to see as the world kind of deglobalizes. And I think all the splintering of the U.S., the flip side of sort of the last 20 years of what's looked like fragmenting of the American sort of polite public discourse, as it's sort of seemed more fractionalized and we end up in our filter bubbles and everything. It's interesting because the good effect of that is probably a lot more comfort with going your own way at the local level. And so I think you can see a like sort of a defederalization and sort of a decentralization of power within the American system, and a lot more experimentation. Like I'd love to see, 30 counties try this thing and 100 counties try that thing and 6 states try this thing, and, and let you kind of pick and choose where you want to set up businesses, where you want to live, and kind of what you want to do. That's kind of the power. That's the power of having 50 states. Is that experimentation.
And do you think now that we have what seems like more freedom to move around and I guess lower switching costs for workers, you can kind of like move between cities and states more freely as work kind of transitions to online. Do you think that is a catalyst then that these governments can use to introduce new experiments and new business zones and new tax cuts and add in Bitcoin as a balance sheet to like strengthen their balance sheet? Like, what do you think?
I think, I mean, first of all, the being able to have healthcare without an employer say what you like or don't like philosophically about, single payer healthcare, or what is it, the ACA that Obama administration pushed through, but like that's been dramatically good for small businesses and small business owners and entrepreneurs being able to still have healthcare without having to be an employee. So that was, I think we're still seeing an unlock of productivity and creativity and entrepreneurship just because people can get insurance, and you can have like a wife with cancer and still be able to get insurance like that. I think, say what you like about wanting healthcare to be a free market, but the good thing is that, people can take on a lot more risk because they're not just hamstrung by employer provided healthcare. And then you've got this remote work thing where people don't need to meet in person anymore. People are so used to closing big deals and signing up for services online now without having to meet somebody in person. That means you really can just pick up and live in Coeur d'Alene or, Lake Country up in Minnesota, or, maybe you just love the Florida Keys and, want to be in Margaritaville every night, but you can roll out your laptop during the day just enough to get some design work done. Like you can do that. I think it's just fascinating. So yeah, it's a great time for that. I was just actually talking this morning. One of my wife's best friends out here is an actor, and she has, thank God, switched over from retail as the way that she supports and kind of gets to auditions and does that whole thing, to working in marketing, from her laptop. And she works for like companies in San Diego and Orange County, and she can do it on her own time. She can miss 6 hours from 12 to 6 to go to a couple auditions, and then work from 6 p.m. to midnight, and that's totally normal now. And she can get paid like a normal middle management, senior management type salary while still being flexible enough to continue pursuing her acting. And that's true of so many people that want to pursue coaching basketball. We've got somebody on our customer service team who's like a high school coach in a Midwestern state, and he does customer service stuff in the morning, and then after he gets his kids to bed, he does like a couple more hours of cleanup at night, but like the whole middle of his day is doing his passion.
Love it. Do you think that we're going to see, we've already seen in the last couple of years, a decent amount of migration within the US between different cities, also outside of the US internationally? Do you think we see more migration in the coming couple of years than the last two, or do you think we kind of like revert towards the mean and get back to a normal?
Yeah, I think we're at mean reversion time, probably. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think, if you move, if you move to Austin after 2019, you bought the top. It's not that much different than San Francisco. There's plenty of bums and the traffic sucks. It is awesome that there's a high density of Bitcoiners though. So, that is that is a huge bonus, and I got a lot of friends out there. But yeah, I think, again, you just got to go like where you're comfortable, you know? Like we've got people in like Idaho and Montana, but we got people in Manhattan. And I live in the burbs of Los Angeles because I like the weather. It's the only warm, dry coastline in the history, you know, of the most powerful nation in history. Like, maybe it's worth the sunshine tax. I could go without some of the policies around here, but you know, it's sunny right now. I like it.
Yeah, can't beat it. All right, I want to transition to some of the work you're doing with Bitcoin startups. You've been an investor for a long time. You working at Zonte Capital as well in El Salvador. Can you talk to me a bit about how that works and the kind of the investing strategy there?
Yeah, sure. So I've invested in over 50 companies in the last decade, probably a dozen Bitcoin startups over the last 3 or 4. I started the Bitcoiner Ventures syndicate on AngelList about 2 years ago. And my partners are Jan Pritzker, Louis Liu, and Stefan Livera. We've done 7 deals there into great startups like Impervious and Zion, Bitrefill, Unchained Capital, Galoy. There's 2 more. Anyway, Revolt, and now there's 1 more. Anyway, and then I'm an advisor to the Bitcoin Venture Fund out of Trammell Venture Partners, which was like the lead investor in Voltage and Impervious as well. So that's Chris Calicott and that team, Matt Snow. And then recently, actually just last month, started El Zonte Capital with Max Kaiser and Stacy Herbert. They have a lot of time on their hands after canceling their contract with the Associated Press, which was the producer of their Kaiser report on Russia Today, which is, or I guess it was RT America or something. But anyway, that's kind of off the air now after 13 years. And so they got a lot of time, and they've been spending a ton of time in El Salvador, and they know everybody. And, you know, that one is really, it really is about promoting and helping like layer 2 and coming layer 3 Bitcoin ecosystem startups. So it really is interesting for me because, you know, with one hat, I'm sitting here at Swan looking at like, I think at least another 10, 15 years of sustainable margin promoting Bitcoin as a store of value. But I get to have like early looks at all these startups working on medium of exchange, and we get to look for partnerships for Swan, and I get to allocate capital to those. And, you know, in case medium of exchange takes off like way faster, you know, at least I personally have a stake in some of these startups that are doing more medium of exchange and that kind of work.
No, so is El Zonte Capital focused specifically on investing in startups in El Salvador? Do you think that will be a hub for Lightning startups over time? Where do you think about El Salvador as a kind of economic zone when it comes to Lightning?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's definitely not an exclusive thesis or mandate that the companies have to be in El Salvador. I think it's more of the types of things that El Salvador needs and wants, and the types of companies that are looking at El Salvador are the types of companies that we're looking at. Their first market could easily be South Africa or Nigeria or somewhere else, or even, you know, something in the US, but it would be something that would be, you know, more focused on this Bitcoin as medium of exchange, Bitcoin as like a better monetary technology that enables things that we weren't able to do, like value for value podcasting or streaming sats in games and those kinds of things. So I think it's just looking for more, you know, it's a little bit more of, you know, bringing this all the way back around to how we started. Like, I came into this space confused, thinking that it was like 85% technology and 15% money. It turns out that it's not. It's actually like 85% money and like 15% technology. And my whole company, my whole life ever since has been focused on Bitcoin as money. But it's not a dumb rock, right? It's a monetary network, and it is programmable money. And that 15% of where we are today, that may expand. We may someday, you know, 50 years from now, look at it and say, listen, it's about equally important that Bitcoin is money and that Bitcoin is technology.
Interesting.
You know, it's the internet of money. They're both in there. It's money and technology.
Right. Do you have any frameworks you like to use for thinking about how to value some of these companies? especially at an early stage when we're talking about medium of exchange and Lightning companies. How do you think about what that addressable market might look like, what those margins might look like, and whether or not it's a good investment?
I mean, when you're talking about a seed fund and you're doing like pre-seed deals and seed deals and maybe chipping in on an A round, you're mostly betting on team. You already believe in the size of the market. You already believe in the timing. And so if they have like a product that makes sense and a good team, that's the two that are left over. But, you know, almost by definition, if you're working on something in Bitcoin, you know, the market and the timing are right. That's why it's a hot industry.
Right. Interesting.
So you just got to look at, I'm just looking at team and product. That's it.
I know we're running out of time, but I want to hear some predictions for the future of both Bitcoin and the Lightning Network at large. First, I'll ask, do you have any kind of controversial views that you think are right but are not widely believed or widely promoted in the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Well, you had to add in the Bitcoin ecosystem because basically all of my views are not widely held globally. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to try to be contrarian. I'll just, I'll say that I think I plan my personal finances, family finances, and company finances sort of with a expectation that there's a 90% chance we have sat cent parity before the end of the decade. So $1 million a coin by 2030. I think there's like a 90% chance. There's also a good chance it's higher than that. But I should say, like, I think there's only about a 10% chance that we don't hit $1 million before then. I've also said quite a bit, and I feel pretty confident that you'll be able to pay for most goods and services around the world denominated in Satoshis by 2035.
Okay.
So I think we'll actually be like that far along with medium of exchange that we're already pretty advanced on unit of account.
Yeah. What do you think the first Bitcoin app will be that gets 1 billion users?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it'll just be paying for things on the internet. That's all. Like, it's just internet money. I think that's, it'll be a lot of companies that add up to that $1 billion.
Right. Yeah.
Or that billion users, but it's just paying for things. It's money. That's the natural application. You're just paying for things.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of really interesting perspectives that I haven't heard much of from other guests. So I appreciate that. And before we go, where can people go to learn more about you and the work you're doing?
Let's see. Swan.com. I'm Cory Klippsten on Twitter. CoryKlippsten. You should definitely check out the Bitcoin Canon, which is swan.com/canon, CANON. And that's where you can basically go down any sort of Bitcoin rabbit hole. So it's topical, like Lynn Alden put together a list of resources about Bitcoin and energy, or Guy Swan doing like a Bitcoin 101, or Des Dickerson doing like Bitcoin and gaming, Brecky doing Bitcoin and art. And you can kind of just go really deep on different subjects related to Bitcoin. That's pretty cool. And then I have a daily newsletter called The Daily Bitcoiner, which is at cory.substack.com, and that one is free, and it's just one of the best pieces of educational content from the last 12 years of Bitcoin each day. So one podcast episode, one YouTube video, one tweet storm, one blog post. We've basically gone through and compiled the top 1,000 individual pieces of Bitcoin content. And yes, you can submit pieces that are new that you think deserve to be qualified. We'll take a look. But yeah, people are absolutely loving that, and the sub list is growing really fast, and I think people really appreciate getting that in there, and it's really easy to forward and share with friends and family and stuff like that. So it's a good resource.
That's a very cool idea. Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Welcome to the Lightning Round presented by Voltage, the industry standard for Lightning Network infrastructure. Creating layer 2 applications and services on Bitcoin starts with Voltage, where you can spin up nodes, get access to liquidity, optimize your node, and much more. Voltage is leading the way as the next generation platform for Lightning, and if you want to check them out, you can get a free trial at voltage.cloud. Lightning round, here we go. In the last 7 days, you guys sent in 12,220 sats, 12 different supporters sent in 13 different messages. Before we get into those messages, a quick rundown of the top 5 supporters. We have Nile, who sent in 2,756 sats, Y sent in 2,470, BTC Rich sent in 2,254, Stemar42 sent in 1,648, and an anonymous user sent in 980 sats. Now, let's get into the messages, but before we do that, just so everyone knows, these messages are all part of Fountain's latest cross-app comments feature. So you guys should be able to see these messages, most of them, any ones that are public, you'll be able to see them on my podcast feed. So if you go to the episode on Fountain or any other podcasting 2.0 app that supports the cross-app comment spec, you're going to be able to see all these messages. They're going to be ranked by the number of sats sent along with them. So if there's multiple comments on a show, you want to get your comment to the top, you got to send in more sats than the previous highest post. Real quick now, let's get into the messages. BTC Rich sends in a message on episode 33 with Pierre Rochard, which is quickly becoming one of the most popular episodes. And BTC Rich says, amazing news hearing about Kraken. I agree, Kraken is on fire right now. They have now one of the top 10 nodes on the Lightning Network. And it was just kind of hinted on Twitter a couple days ago that BitGo is actually working on their own Lightning Network integration in the wake of this Kraken launch. So it seems like this movement is really picking up steam, and Kraken's step up is starting to be noticed among other exchanges and custodians. We'll see how far this goes, but good signs early on. J24 sends in 343 sats. It says, your show is currently my favorite podcast. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, J24, for the kind words and the sats. Really appreciate it. We're cranking out lots of content. If you guys have any interesting guests you'd like to have appear on the show, anyone I should reach out to, fire away a comment over the Lightning Network, and I will see it, and I will hopefully be able to reach out to that person and set up an interview. We had a few test transactions come in from Mary Oscar. Must still be working on some cool stuff over at Fountain. And then we had a few, Niall sends in a comment that says nice in response to Pierre Rochard's episode. And we had an anonymous user send in a message that says boost in response to episode 23 with Adam Curry, which is the most popular episode of all of them so far. So TBD on who's going to dethrone Adam Curry as the most popular episode over time, but right now Adam is in the lead. Thank you guys for sending in comments and questions. Hope you enjoyed this show. Let me know what you think. Send in a comment, send in a question, send in some sats, and I will see you in a few days.